For well over a century now, whenever someone asked, how on earth did they build the Great Pyramid, the standard answer was always the same. A ramp, right? A colossal one. I mean, imagine standing at the base and picturing a mile of packed rubble, built wide enough to haul massive stones right up the pyramid's face. We're talking about a temporary structure that, by the time it actually reached the top, would literally be larger in volume than the pyramid itself. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Today we're unpacking a thrilling scientific detective story in this explainer, one that challenges pretty much everything we thought we knew about the Great Pyramid of Giza. We've debated for decades about how they moved roughly 2.3 million blocks, averaging 2.5 tons each by the way, 146 meters into the sky without iron tools or pulleys. But what if the real machine wasn't outside the pyramid at all? What if instead there was a hidden counterweight system sealed right inside that mountain of limestone and granite, never meant to be seen again?
And this brilliantly illustrates the fatal flaw of those conventional theories. An external ramp, whether it's straight or spiraling around the outside, requires more material and more labor to build than the monument itself. To reach those upper courses of the pyramid, the ramp has to just keep growing. It needs to be wider at the base to stay stable, and longer to keep the incline manageable for the workers. Plus, there is absolutely no trace of it. Zero. There's no massive rubble field at the base, and no abandoned ramp remnants that match the sheer scale required for something like that. Whatever raised the top two-thirds of this building, it for sure didn't leave the wreckage we'd expect to find sitting outside.
So that leaves us with a pretty stark question. If the ramp wasn't on the outside, where was it? Back in 1999, a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin, working alongside his father, who was a retired civil engineer, started from that exact absence of evidence. They thought, well, if there's no external ramp big enough to see, maybe the ramp isn't external at all. What if, instead of wrapping a giant ramp around the outside, the pyramid was actually built from the inside out?
Houdin came up with this incredibly elegant two-phase construction theory. He spent 2 decades developing it and running extensive models using 3D industrial simulation software. Here's how it works. Step 1. The bottom third of the pyramid, so up to roughly 43 meters, was built the conventional way, using a straight external ramp. Because at that height, an external ramp is completely manageable. But once it reached that 43-meter mark, that outer ramp was dismantled. All that material was then recycled and reabsorbed straight into the structure itself. Then comes step 2. Above that 43-meter line, the builder switched to an internal spiral ramp. This would be a corridor cut right into the pyramid's own mass, rising in a helix with a really gentle 7% incline all the way to the summit. Sledges could just be hauled up this internal spiral, totally protected from the wind, without wasting a single block of extra material.
So the crucial point is that mounting physical evidence actually backs this up. Houdini didn't just build a cool computer model, he pointed to actual structural clues. First off, the outer casing stones were placed first, not last. That's a huge deal because it allowed the builders to monitor the geometry of the pyramid as it rose. You literally cannot do that if a massive external ramp is covering the sides. Second, if you look just 15 kilometers away at the Abusir's Sun Temple, which was built shortly after Khufu, you'll find remnants of an actual internal ramp, so we know the Egyptians already had the engineering know-how. Third, there are these faint, whitish phantom lines you can see on the pyramid's exterior that perfectly match a 7% spiraling incline. And finally, right at the corner where Houdini calculated an internal ramp would need a notch to physically turn the stone blocks, Egyptologist Bob Breyer climbed up and found exactly that, a massive, unmapped 9-meter square room hidden right behind the masonry.
But it actually gets better, because we have hard, scientific data from decades before Houdin even published his theory. In 1986, a French team used a technique called microgravimetry on the Great Pyramid. This is a scientific technique that measures minute variations in mass and density to detect hidden empty spaces. They were hoping to find a secret chamber, but they didn't, and so their data just kind of went ignored. But when you look at those microgravimetry scans today, they show a 15% subdensity zone. That means missing mass, and that missing mass forms a distinct spiral shape inside the pyramid. Without even realizing it at the time, those scientists in 1986 found undeniable physical proof of empty space right where Houdin predicted the internal ramp would be.
Moving on to Section 2, the counterweight engine, where we'll be rethinking the Grand Gallery.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that while the internal ramp theory works beautifully for your standard blocks, it doesn't explain everything. Like, how did they lift the 60-ton granite beams that roof the king's chamber? You simply can't fit 600 men inside a narrow internal ramp to haul a 60-ton block up a 7% incline. It just doesn't work. Houdin realized the answer was actually hiding in plain sight right inside the Grand Gallery. The physical clues in this space perfectly match a massive industrial machine.
Along the benches of this soaring 48-meter-long corridor, there are brown grease marks, almost like racing stripes, left exactly where a heavy, lubricated wooden trolley would have slid up and down. There are continuous chisel marks running the entire length of the gallery, which would be perfect for holding stabilizing wooden beams to keep a trolley on track. And at the very top step, there's V-shaped chiseling, perfectly designed to let heavy ropes slide smoothly. So the Grand Gallery wasn't just some ceremonial space, it was a giant counterweight engine. It allowed a small team of men to drop a heavy weight down the gallery, which would effortlessly pull those 60-ton granite blocks up the exterior of the pyramid.
To push this investigation even further, modern science has stepped in with an absolutely incredible tool. In 2015, the Scan Pyramids project began using muons. If you're not familiar, muons are tiny subatomic cosmic ray particles that rain down from the atmosphere and can pass right through solid rock. By setting up highly sensitive detectors, scientists can map the inside of a mountain of stone without moving a single pebble. It is literally like borrowing particle physics to take a giant X-ray of 4,500 years of history.
And then, in 2017, the team published something jaw-dropping in the journal Nature. Those muon scans revealed a massive, completely untouched void sitting right above the Grand Gallery. It's at least 30 meters long. Think about that for a second. No living eye has ever seen inside this space. Is it a relief chamber to distribute weight? Is it a walled-up piece of the construction ramp? Or is it part of that counterweight machine system we just talked about? We honestly don't know yet. But the fact that the most relentlessly studied building on planet Earth is still hiding a room the size of a cathedral nave is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Which brings us to Section 3, the human machine. We're going to look at the logistics, the meat, and a middle manager named Mayer.
First things first, we need to completely clear away the myths about slaves and aliens building the pyramids. The real truth is an absolute triumph of human logistics. In a lost city near the pyramids, archaeologists found that every single day this workforce consumed 2 tons of meat. That required a steady daily supply of 21 cattle and 23 sheep and goats. And this wasn't scraps. This was premium beef, the kind usually reserved for the absolute highest status individuals in ancient Egypt. Plus, skeletons from the workers' cemetery show they received high-level medical care. We're talking perfectly set broken bones and even evidence of survived brain surgeries. You do not feed expendable slaves 2 tons of premium beef a day, and you definitely do not carefully mend their bones. This was a highly valued, incredibly well-paid workforce, provisioned by a massive, state-run supply chain.
And we actually know exactly how they managed all of this, because we have their paperwork. In 2013, archaeologists found the oldest inscribed papyrus ever discovered on Earth. And you know what it was? It wasn't a sacred hymn or a magic spell. It was a day-to-day logbook, a work diary belonging to a middle manager named Inspector Mirror. Day by day, Mirror recorded his crew's deliveries of Tura limestone. He wrote down the canals they used, the boats they loaded, and the strict 10-day schedules they had to keep. And recent geological surveys actually proved that Mirror was sailing on the Aharamat, which was this massive, now vanished branch of the Nile River that ran directly to the foot of the Giza Plateau. It essentially allowed boats to deliver stone right to the construction site's front door.
But of course, as we solve some mysteries, new ones pop up. Here's a nagging little puzzle to keep you thinking. Over a period of 20 years, workers cut, dressed, and fitted well over 2 million blocks of limestone and incredibly hard granite. That sheer scale of work demands millions of copper tools, being worn down and resharpened endlessly. And yet, out of all those tools, almost 0 original copper tools have ever been recovered on the plateau. Did they melt them all down to recycle the precious metal? Were they stolen or carried off centuries later? It's a genuine mystery that remains completely unanswered to this day.
When Pharaoh Khufu ordered this mountain of stone to be raised, the massive bureaucracy, the supply chains, the written accounting systems, and the agricultural logistics required to feed tens of thousands of people, none of that existed. Egypt literally had to invent it all from scratch just to get the job done. And that leaves us with a truly provocative realization to wrap up this explainer. We always assume that the Egyptian civilization built the Great Pyramid. But when you look at the sheer scale of the statecraft that had to be invented to manage a project like this, it might actually be the other way around. Egypt didn't just build the pyramid. The act of building the pyramid is what actually forged the centralized, literate Egyptian state we remember today. So what do you think? Did the machine make the mountain, or did the mountain make the nation? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the impossible.